Welcome to the Detroit Sports Room, your home for Detroit sports news and information. Now, here's Jim.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Detroit Sports Room. And in the room today, we have Math Bomb. And I really appreciate you joining me. Some people, well, if you live under a rock, you won't know what he does. So I'm going to have you explain the RAS card system that you invented.
Yeah, so I developed relative athletic scores back in 2013. It actually started a little bit before then, but I started posting about it in 2013. So we're on our 8th year running with this thing. The idea was to develop a very simple, easy to understand composite metric. So when somebody says, oh, this guy is athletic, this guy is unathletic, you had some kind of context to understand what that means. And I tried to build it in a user-friendly way. So I built it on a 0 to 10 scale. Pretty much anybody can understand a 0 to 10. 0 is bad, 10 is good, 5 is right about in the middle. You know, it's pretty simple. I built that system back in 2013. I've been building it up since then. I got a huge data patch in 2017 and changed my formula. It's stayed relatively unchanged since 2017. I've done a little bit with it. We've actually launched online this year, only about a month and a half ago. So you can go to relativeathleticscores.com and find all of my data there. It's all free. There's no charge or anything to pull any of this stuff up. And you can see all player metrics from 1987 to 2020. And of course, all the scores. So it's been a really fun ride. You know, I've been on the New York Giants official website several times. I've been on our official podcast several times. Minnesota Vikings, Miami Dolphins, a couple of other teams. Not the Lions yet. I'm trying to, but not so much the Lions yet. But it's been a really fun ride. I've enjoyed it, and I've had a lot of fun with it. You can find me anywhere at MathBomb on Twitter. Is the best place to find me, and I'm always up for engaging fans if you have questions.
Yeah, you have been more than great with me and with the Detroit Sports Alliance, which I am a part of, coming on our show and helping us with football knowledge. I think that it's interesting to me because we have PFF and we have all these metrics and everything nowadays that we really can take a deeper dive into the players and to understand, you know, a little bit more about what they do and how they do it and why some people are good, some people are bad, you know, or how you can project players out of college, all that type of thing. And the one question, because I think we talked about this before, but how has the pandemic affected you in being able to collect the data that you need?
It was a nightmare this year. You know, we had the combine and everything kind of went okay with the combine because that's early enough that, you know, early March. So a lot of the COVID stuff hadn't really hit yet. But pro days were hit almost immediately. And we only had a couple of official pro days. A lot of players started doing this official pro day thing. And I was real worried, because I've seen a lot of those things in the past where players get with their agents and they do their personal pro days and they tape them and they try to send those tapes out to people. And I'm a cinema buff also. I love movies. I love film. And one of the first things I look for is like, where is that camera when they're doing that 40-yard dash? Because if it's a little bit after that finish line, I can already tell that people are going to doctor their numbers. Because that's an easy trick. It's just forced perspective. You know, anybody that's watched Lord of the Rings knows what forced perspective is. It's just making somebody look smaller or further away just by where your camera's positioned. And every video I saw for the first good deal of time was like that. It was all a little bit past the camera or past the finish line so they could point that angle so it looks like they're finishing a little earlier than they did. So a lot of that data was just not usable. I have a very strict system when it comes to verifying information. I use the APT, the Association of Professional Teams, to get a lot of my data. That's the official pro day numbers that people use. You'll see that on draftscout.com. If anybody's gone there and looked at their metrics, they use that for everything that they get. I don't quite have that volume of access yet, but you know, it's the official numbers that people use. And you try to compare that to what people were doing with these virtual pro days, and it was just completely insane. One of the easiest examples I use is that in 2019, I think we had 2 players in the entire draft class out of 2,000 players that had a sub-4 shuttle time. And the virtual pro days, when I stopped collecting data, which was about 2 weeks into it, I had 11 players that had that. And I forget what the number was for sub 4.4s, but it was just a stupid high percentage. And you're just like, these numbers are not real. There's no way any of these numbers are real. I had some friends that did some tape review that would look at some of the tapes and try to figure out what the numbers were. And every single one came back as like, yeah, that's not even close. So there's a lot of that.
That doctoring actually happens.
Right. I feel really bad because I work a lot with agents and I work a lot with the players themselves, and a lot of those guys do really train so hard, and it really did a disservice to those guys that were trying their best to try to get their name out there and try to get out in front of scouts and get out in front of teams, because they don't really have a lot of opportunities on a good year. And putting it in this kind of year and putting that unrealistic expectation and obvious doctoring of tape and obvious faking of numbers and stuff, it does not help. And you saw that when you started seeing who was getting signed and where. It didn't really matter what guys, virtual pro day numbers were. That didn't help them get signed anywhere. The only guys that got signed were guys that players or teams had met with at the pro day or at the Senior Bowl or the Shrine Bowl. That they had met with previously or seen them previously, because those numbers actually matter to the teams.
That's absolutely true. It's interesting that you mentioned force perspective, because a lot of people don't understand that. I mean, of course, you make people look bigger and all this other stuff, but in fudging numbers and stuff like that to make that player more attractive to teams, that's a math bomb right there, buddy. I don't think a lot of people know that. I mean, the general population or general Lions fans, I don't think they know that happens.
It's an easy trick, and whenever you see somebody that posts their personal filmed pro day, the first thing you got to look is, where is the camera? Yes. Because if that camera is past where the finish line is, those numbers aren't real. Because they already know when they're setting up the camera that those numbers aren't going to be set up honestly. If they set up the numbers straight up along the line, mm-hmm. you already know they're trying to be honest. At least they're trying.
Right. It is amazing. You just picked that right out, and these numbers are garbage. These numbers are garbage. That says a lot about your credibility and about what you do and how hard you work at this, because people think, he makes nice little cards and stuff like that. No, it is a lot of work. It's very professional.
Yeah, I try. The cards themselves are almost nothing. It's the easiest part of the job. I just plug my data into a table and it pulls up that information on a card. I mean, I spent a lot of time designing the cards and making them look how I wanted to. It's my least favorite part of the job is designing how things look. But once I have that, I don't have to do anything. The numbers, they do all the work for me. And, the actual work comes in getting the data, verifying the data, validating it, making sure it's all right. There's so many different sources out there that you can get information from the media and from the teams themselves. And, that didn't help either. There's a lot of the teams that were really accurate in their reporting the past couple of years were just not. I think I don't know whether they saw an opportunity or what to get their guys' names out there, but teams themselves that report numbers are generally accurate because we can verify now. We can verify that information with APT. So teams are really good generally about that stuff. We joke about Ohio State used to do it, Penn State used to do it, Michigan used to do it. A couple teams that used to fudge the numbers a little bit, but once the true numbers come out, everybody can kind of tell. But this year there wasn't really any oversight, so it was just open season.
Oh, you gotta hate that.
It's no fun.
So I have to ask this question. Obviously, how did you get the name Math Bomb?
So back in the day, I was entirely built off of Facebook. I was on Twitter. So this is back when Kowalski was still alive. So this is 9-10 years ago. I don't know, years and years ago.
I missed the guy. Oh,
he was awesome. But anyway, I was on Facebook a lot, and we had this guy whose name I can't say on the podcast. I don't know what you are with swearing, but we can't call his name.
I'm good.
Yeah, well, his nickname was Ape Shit. So because it didn't matter what was going on, he would just go ballistic about the team and stuff, and he would always get calmed down whenever I'd come in and I'd start talking about numbers, because he'd be going off on some tangent about how the team sucks. And I'd be like, look, the numbers don't really back that up. And the numbers say that, these guys are not as bad as they look like they are, or these guys are better than they look like they are. And he'd always talk about, oh, you're dropping them math bombs on us, trying to calm everybody down.
Yep.
So I just started using that as a handle. It's been a while. I'm not even on Facebook anymore. I'm mostly off of Facebook. I'm on Messenger because I have people that I know, but it's fun that kind of stuff is just carried on. And then I designed the logo based on that, and then redesigned it based on that, and then added some of this most recently. But it just stuck, and I've kept it since then.
It's actually a really cool name. And it's like you're dropping knowledge or something, like math bombs. And that's what I thought. So kind of verified in a way, but your bombs had to calm that dude down. So I get it, man. Us Lions fans, we have a hard time sometimes with that.
Right.
And you're like the voice of reason, which I really like. We need to do that. Let's get into that a little bit. How about, what do you think of this team as it's constructed right now? How do you see them? I mean, they've got them everywhere from being totally awful to being pretty good. I mean,
and that's where it is, man. The potential of this team, it blows me away how much potential this team has. And Lions fans, we've heard that word before. We've heard that a million times, how much potential something has. And we know that all you got to do is have a little bit of luck. And we don't generally have any luck. I love the potential of this team. This is the most excited. I'm actually in the middle of writing an article right now. It's a multi-part article for Pride of Detroit that's talking about it, about how there's so many things that could go right with this team, so many things that could be like top of the league good, but there's so many things that have to go right for those things to work out. Matthew Stafford coming into 2019 was not a highly lauded player. He was coming off of a back injury, new offense, head coach that wasn't really well thought of. And he played as the best, or one of the best, if you don't want to call him the best, but one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL for 8 weeks. And the win column didn't really show it, but as far as individual play goes, you can't get a lot better than Matthew Stafford was playing. And he's coming back from that injury. He could have played through it in 2019. I think they kind of saw where things were going and shut things down, which is smart, but he's coming back and he's playing really well. If his offensive line can hold up, and we've got at least 2 new positions, probably 3 on the offensive line before the end of the year. They're going to be starters. You only really have your center and your left tackle. Your right tackle is locked in, but that's a new position with Halapoulivaati Vaitai.
Congratulations on saying that. Goodness gracious.
I love his name. It's a great name, man. It's really just spelled like it sounds like it's spelled. You just got to kind of read it out. But then you don't know who's playing left guard or right guard. You don't know whether it's going to be Joe Dahl coming back, because Joe Dahl didn't really play all that well. He didn't play terribly, but he didn't play well enough that you're like, yeah, solid starter. He's locked in. We don't know who's playing right guard. We drafted Jonah Jackson and Logan Stenberg. We don't know which spot either of those guys are playing. Jonah Jackson has played both left guard and right guard. He's much more suited, I believe, to left guard. He played right guard at Ohio State, played left guard. The other way around. Played left guard at Ohio State, played right guard at Rutgers. Logan Stenberg played left guard his entire career at Kentucky. But if you watch the guy play, that is a atypical right guard. You put him at right guard and you have him maul people. You put him next to Halapoulivaati Vaitai, another big mauler type. You put him right next to that guy and you let him maul people. But he's also a 4th-round pick with, all the penalties. So you don't want to put that guy in there. So there's a lot of uncertainty on that offensive line. And that's only the first if for Matthew Stafford. We haven't gotten into his run game and whether the run game can pick up, and the receivers and whether they can hold up to injury, because they haven't shown that they can. Running backs have that same problem. A lot of this stuff comes down to durability. Offensive line, running back core is just full of guys who've been hurt all over the place. Yeah. There's a lot of uncertainty with this team. And the series that I'm writing for Pride of Detroit is called Glass Cannon, because I play a lot of video games. I play a lot of role-playing games. And Glass Cannon is somebody that has all the attack and none of the defense.
Yep.
So people might think, I'm going to talk about how the offense is going to be good and the defense is going to be bad. Or maybe I'll talk about how Stafford's really good, but he's injury prone. And it's neither of those things. It's just you look at this team and it has the potential to be the best team in the NFL. But good Lord, can anything happen and this team could just fall apart? The offensive line doesn't hold up. One of the receivers get injured, and the entire offense changes. The entire dynamic of how this team runs changes. Either of the starting running backs get injured, and the entire dynamic changes because you can't run with power with DeAndre Swift. And you can't run as a receiver out of the backfield with Kerryon Johnson. There's just so many things that are designed to be around everything working perfectly. And the chances of that happening are just so slim.
That's true. Now, with Logan Stenberg, that was interesting to me because I don't think he has the bend right now, and I don't think he's a good pass protector. So I think he's going to take a little bit longer than people think. I don't think he's going to be a day one starter. I don't see that. He really needs to work with the trainers on his flexibility. I don't know if you got to work him up on the RAS system or not, but agility-wise, I didn't think he was that good.
It's as bad as you think it was.
Oh, good.
And it's actually the same way with Jonah Jackson. They both have very similar athletic profiles. The Lions don't seem to really care all that much about agility when it comes to their offensive linemen. And somebody that covers metrics like I do, that's a bit concerning because that's like the prime predictive metric when you're looking at offensive linemen is how agile they are. Because the best offensive linemen in the NFL for the past 3 decades have always been the guys that can move in space, not the guys that are just explosive at the point of attack, but the guys that can really get going, the guys that can really move. And the Lions don't have anybody on their roster like that except Frank Ragnow. And Ragnow had, I think it was his cone, he bombed. He did good on everything else. He's one of the most athletic centers ever, and you can see that when you watch the guy play. But, you know, Stenberg and Jonah Jackson both, they had really poor agility drills, but their explosion drills were really good. The Lions have been preaching about trying to get better on their run game for a little while. And one of the ways that you can do that is get guys that are explosive at the point of the attack. Get the guys that can push people off the line, that can move them, that can give your running back space, which is why a pick like DeAndre Swift makes sense. Now, I didn't like that pick, and I'm not going to try to sit here and say, oh, I like it now because he's on our team and we have to like it, right? But I do understand it a little bit more once I saw Logan Stenberg and Jonah Jackson get picked up, because now they're looking at guys who can create holes for somebody like DeAndre Swift to get a little bit of space. You know, in the NFL, it's always about creating chunk yardage. No matter what offensive scheme you're running, it's about getting chunks of space. You're either going to get chunks of space because you're bigger and more powerful. The Raiders running offense from a couple of years ago, obviously it was a pretty good last year, but a couple of years ago is what I'm referring to. You know, that offense was entirely predicated about getting space by being bigger and more powerful than everybody else you were going against. The Ravens have done that for years. You know, some passing offense or running offense are about being more athletic and more agile than everybody else. You've seen that with the Eagles, which is what I originally thought they were trying to do. And the Dallas Cowboys, their running offensive has always been about being quicker and being smoother movers in space, so that if you get a speedy pass rusher on the edge, you can get that pass rusher to a point you need him to be so your runner can get past him. It's not just about defending yourself against the guy in front of you. It's about getting him to a position to where he's not going to be where you need your running back to be. And that's where this offense is starting to do. They're trying to build an offensive line that will create space at the point of the attack. And that gives you your 5 yards, your 6 yards. You go back to the 2014 Cincinnati Bengals and you look at that offense with Jeremy Hill and Giovanni Bernard, and I think that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to create an offensive line that will get enough push that a power back like Kerryon Johnson, he's not very big, but he is a power back. You get a guy like that can create a little bit of space because he's explosive. You create a little bit of space, he can get you 4 or 5 yards. And then when you want to get some big chunks, some bigger chunks, you put DeAndre Swift out there. You get a little bit of space and you get 7, 8, 9 yards. If it gets stuffed, you're going to lose a couple yardage. But you have those opportunities to get yourself some bigger chunks by putting a faster guy out there that can get you those chunks. And, of course, you can get him on the edge and get those receiving yards out of him. It's not a traditional way of building an offense. Now, a lot of people want to have those high-powered offenses. You want to look at the Kansas City Chiefs. You want to look at those real big, high-octane offenses and figure out how can we do that. You know, a lot of teams don't build that way. They're trying to build their own thing in a way that works, and it's not just about creating the best offense in the NFL. It's about creating a good offense that can consistently gain yardage and get touchdowns. And I think that's what the Lions are trying to do. There's so many asterisks that go into this about how things have to work out.
There really is. My thing is, and this is going to be my next question about it, though, I can see where we're trying to establish the running game and how that could work out, and we could get better holes and that could work out, but it's pass protection I'm concerned about. I mean, if this run game doesn't work, we're in trouble.
Yeah. I don't even doubt that at all. And it's not even as good as people want to think that it is, because the Lions have multiple new players on that offensive line. I already mentioned that. The Halapoulivaati Vaitai is the big one. They picked up at right tackle. And I really liked that signing. Don't get me wrong. I'm probably higher on that signing than most people. When he was signed, one of my first, actually might have been my first article that I wrote was about how that's the perfect signing for this team. And I really like Vaitai's fit in Darrell Bevel's system, even before I think they switched things up a little bit from what I expected. But I really like his fit in the system and what he can do. But if you're going to go out and tell me that Vaitai is a great pass protector, you're lying or you've never watched him. There's very serious concerns about how he deals with guys with speed.
Yep.
The power guys I don't care about. I don't think anybody at any point should care about any of the Lions blockers for power. Except maybe Wiggins. I think Ibushi's all right with it. But even those veterans that they have.
I don't think Decker's great with that either.
Decker's, when he's healthy, he's fine with it. His issue's been just staying healthy. Whenever he's hurt, you can tell, But like even Ibushi and Stenberg and Logan or Jonah Jackson, all those guys are really good with power. But when they deal with speed, they all struggle. And it's really hard to try to justify an offense that runs only when things are ideal, because NFL teams are just not built that way. Every team in our division has a speed rusher. The Packers win with Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith, both of which are pretty powerful dudes, but they're fast enough to get around some of that stuff. And I don't think the Lions did enough to defend themselves against that kind of defense. And they face them twice a year. People tend to overrate the divisional matchups, but that's still 2 times a year that you have to deal with a pass rush that you are not built to defend. And I don't see an easy way to just explain away some of the moves the Lions have made for that type of thing.
Some of my thinking last year, because T.J. Hawkins had like one really good game and then it was kind of not as good. Yep. But my thinking was that him and Jesse James both were kind of more pass blocking. Than they were going, and then they were receiving tight ends for quite a while because our pass block was miserable, So I think that might be something that they might use to chip somebody on the edge or something like that, or they have that in the plan, because TJ's a really good run blocker. He's a really good pass blocker too. I mean, I think they're both really good blockers, and I think that's an underrated thing on this team. What do you think about T.J. Hawkinson first and Jesse James? Because most people think he had a disappointing season last year.
Yeah, so the problem with Hawkinson is that he is a good blocker, but you don't draft a top 10 tight end because he's a good blocker. You just don't. That's what you do in the 4th round. And people can go into whether or not there's positional value that high or not. I'm not going to get into that argument right now. But if your reason for drafting him was because he can block, you have already screwed up, not just for yourself, but for the team and for the player. That ain't fair to him, setting those kind of expectations. The Lions fans expected that Arizona game to be the rule, not the exception. Mm-hmm. And what they ended up getting was a pretty bad rookie tight end. And you could argue that he wasn't. No, he was pretty bad. There was some injury stuff that played into it. He had a concussion. I think it was a shoulder injury. I think the other one was. He had another one. Ankle. That was ankle. But anyway, he was dealing with some injury stuff, right? So, I mean, there's some other stuff that goes into it. And honestly, year 1 for a tight end is practically worthless for projection. So understand, I'm saying this, I'm only evaluating his play, not trying to project it based on that. Rookie tight ends always struggle. And those that don't generally struggle going forward. So it's just the way that things are. But year 2, coming in as a receiving tight end, I want to see him get more targets. I want to see him take advantage of those targets. I want to see him block and actually chip guys and knock them the hell out. Yeah. But the offense has to work for that to happen. Again, the pass protection has to hold up. The run game has to be sufficient enough that he doesn't have to sit there every single time they go for a play action pass and block. Yeah, he should be able to chip, but that shouldn't be every single assignment he gets, because that's just as predictable as having him run a route every play, which everybody hated with Eric Ebron, because you were basically wasting a play by having him try to block. It's the same thing with him. You don't want to try to pigeonhole him into that kind of role. Whether or not he can hold up to it, we'll see. Year 2 for a tight end is huge. But that's where my concerns about Darrell Bevell come in. Darrell Bevell has never been able to scheme very well for tight ends. He just hasn't. You saw it in 2019. He didn't know what the hell to do with his tight ends. Jesse James, you mentioned, had a pretty down year. Yeah, he was pretty bad, but he's pretty bad in a scheme that doesn't really favor any of his skills. And I'm hopeful that he takes a step forward. But if he doesn't, this team is in really bad shape, because they're going to be using a lot of 2 tight end sets, whether we want them to or not. They're going to, because the scheme's designed that way. They're going to use a lot of 2 tight ends. And we can't be trotting out 7th-round pick Isaac Nada, who barely played last year, or undrafted free agent Harrison Bryant, who I don't really have a whole lot of expectations for. Taking guys that are better suited for fullback and expecting them to be full-time tight ends is just not a winning formula in the NFL. So I have a lot of hope for Hockenson. I think that there's enough that he showed during his rookie season to project him to being a lot better in his second year. But again, a lot of things have to go right for that to happen.
I have a couple of questions here on people that we may have to re-sign or tender a contract to. Kenny Galladay is the first one. Taylor Decker is the second. Number one, what do you think about Kenny Galladay as a player? Number two, how much money do you think he deserves, and are the Lions going to give it to him?
Love Kenny Galladay. Was huge on him pre-draft. It's one of my, everybody that follows the draft has that one guy they get to point to and be like, ha, nailed it. Right? So I loved Kenny Galladay, and not only did I love him, but that was when I first started getting some insider information to how things were going on. The Lions were very interested in Kenny Galladay leading up to the draft. A lot. And no other team was. There was just the Lions and nobody. I think there was one other team that was sniffing around, but he didn't get a lot of attention. And then a couple of weeks before the draft, 5 or 6 different teams started sniffing up on Kenny Galladay, and the Lions immediately scheduled another meeting with him. And teams don't usually schedule second meetings with players unless they have some unresolved issue, like an injury or something, or they want to make sure they're going to get that guy. And they did that right before the draft. It was the few days leading up to the draft. And I actually posted about it and said, like, the Lions are going to draft Kenny Galladay a round or 2 earlier than people projected. People projected him in the 4th or 5th round. He went in the 3rd round of the Lions. Nailed it. So that's my brag for the day, that I nailed that pick. I also called the Jake Rudock pick, although that is less notable.
Yes, much now. Much less now. So do you think what do you think he's worth, and what do you think the Lions are willing to pay him?
I think they're going to pay him top money, man. He's going to make top 5 receiver money. It's just going to happen. They have to. He led the league in touchdown passes in 2019. He's one of the best receivers in the NFL, and he's young. He's generally durable, and that's one of the biggest issues the Lions have, and one of the biggest problems that they have going forward. In 2020, the Lions have only 1 wide receiver under contract, and it's 5th-round pick Quintez Cephas. And the Lions are not going to roll into 2021 with a wide receiver who ran a 4.73 as their starter. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
And I don't think they're going to sign Marvin Jones, who's had an injury in the last 3 years. I don't think he ended up on IR last year. I don't remember. Yeah, but the 2 previous years, he had ended up on IR. Yeah, you can't have a guy like that as your bona fide starter. You got to have somebody who's a bit more durable. Galladay is a company man. He loves the team. He loves the scheme. He buys into everything that you put him into. He's a team player. And this kind of team is built around those guys that will just do their job. I think that they're going to pay him top 5 receiver money. The kind of money that Lions fans are going to be like, oh, he's a great player, but was he really worth it? That's the kind of money he's going to get. That kind of money.
Good. I think he deserves it, to be quite
He does.
Okay, I'm going to go to Taylor Decker now. To me, this is one of the bigger Mysteries right now because I think he's average at best. That's just what I think. I know everybody might be high on him. I'm not that high on him. Do they give him an extension? What do they do with him?
I think they have to. I think he's a little bit better than average. I think he's above average. I think he's somewhere about halfway between average and really, really good. He's good enough that you don't need to replace him, and you don't even really need to look to replace him, and that's perfectly fine. He's not good enough that you're going to put him in that top 5, top 10 ratings. He's not going to be in those. Right. But he's a good enough player. I don't want old school Lions fans, not that you're going to know anybody old school, but just in case you do, we're talking about a Jeff Backus type of guy, a guy who can do what you need him to do. He's there. He can block. You might want to replace him because you think he's not great and you want a great player, but you don't need to replace him because you've got holes elsewhere.
That's true.
The reason I think they need to resign him, though, because we're talking about the current ownership. We're talking about the current general manager and the current coach. This general manager has been trying to build this offensive line his entire tenure. The entire time he's been here, he's been trying to build that offensive line. You've got Taylor Decker. You've got Graham Glasgow, you've got Joe Dahl, you've got Frank Ragnow, you've got all these top drafted offensive linemen, and then free agents like Rick Wagner, like Halapoulivaati Vaitai. You've got guys that he's brought in, TJ Lang, another one, guys that he's brought in to try to fix this offensive line. If it doesn't work, what the hell are you doing here? What is your purpose? What is the point of you being hired in the first place and trying to build this team? So whether or not you like Taylor Decker, this team has to re-sign him because the guy that does the re-signings is Bob Quinn. And if Bob Quinn doesn't re-sign the only piece he has left from his first start, he has no reason to exist. There's no reason for him to be there. So Taylor Decker needs to be re-signed. Now, all that logic aside, let me talk about what I think about him as a player. I think he deserves to be re-signed. I think the Lions should re-sign him. I think it's essential that they do. Because if they don't, this team is looking at a complete rebuild from the top down. We're talking about Matthew Stafford in a year that you can actually afford to replace him. You're talking about, okay, now we've got an offensive line we got to rebuild. Maybe we do let Decker walk. We let Stafford go after a year. We draft a quarterback. We draft a left tackle. We try to rebuild this team. If they don't give an extension to Taylor Decker, this team is rebuilding again under the same management. Now, if this team sucks in 2020, we're rebuilding again with different management. But in either case, re-signing Taylor Decker makes sense, at least to a 3-year extension. I think they try for a 5 to 6. I think that a 3-year extension makes the most sense, both for the player and for the team. I think that Taylor Decker signing a 3-year extension gives him the time to try to show that he's worth more money, to try to get another contract at the end of this one. I think that'll probably give him some more guarantees than he would get under a long contract. Not as much money because it's a longer time. But over the period of time that he's looking, it would give him the best guarantees. I think a 3-year extension is probably what they try for, and I think that's what Decker has earned based on his time here. A healthy Taylor Decker keeps Matthew Stafford clean. That's just the way that things are. And I think the team tries to continue with that.
That makes perfect sense to me. Jeff Backus, though, going back to him, he was like Mr. Steady. He hardly ever missed a game.
Oh,
Taylor Decker,
all durability.
Not so much. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
yeah.
It is a good comparison, though, I think, because he was steady, not great, But that's kind of the way this team goes, to be honest.
Right.
They just kind of go.
Find a chart. They're in the middle of it.
Yeah, it really is. So, I was trying to think. There's certain players that I wanted you to see what you thought, and unfortunately, the rookies, and that's the hard part for you, I think, at this point. Do you have any thoughts on like Okudah and Swift and those guys?
Oh yeah, and I love Okudah. So I told you that this draft made me, or this year is the most excited I've ever been as a Lions fan, even with my reservations. Part of that is a player like Jeff Okudah. Studying analytics and metrics the way that I do, there's always the big hype around the superb athletes. You got your Jalen Ramseys, your Patrick Petersons, those guys that really stand out. Those guys, they get all the press. But when it really comes down to it, stuff like RAS and any athletic testing is just a piece of the puzzle. You've got so many other pieces you got to put into place. And I have never studied a player more than Jeff Okudah when it comes to, or liked a player more than Jeff Okudah when it comes to being a complete package. Is he the best athlete in the universe? No. There's some concerns about how fast he is. There are concerns about how quick he is. There's no concerns about how explosive he is. He's extremely explosive. But he's generally fast enough. And fast enough is not, I'm going to draft that guy top 5. Fast enough is not good enough to draft a guy top 5. But I always go back to some of the people that I talked to at the Combine, which talked about the interviews that he had and the amount of preparation that he took. Because there were people that asked him about no more than half the teams in the league. And Okudah was able to tell you the defensive coordinator, the defensive backs coach, and the entire personnel grouping that they had for those teams. This guy prepares like you would not believe. And that kind of talent, that's something that we don't have in our numbers like RAS. That doesn't come out in a number like that. That's good. That's something that you really want. We don't have a number to quantify that. It would be great if we did, and I would be the first guy out there patenting that stuff if I was able to put a number on it. But I can't, so I don't. But having a guy that can go out there and just point out every single facet of half the teams in the league's defense, that tells you this guy pays attention. He is looking at every single team. He goes into those film studies, and we all know that Matt Patricia, no matter what is you like or hate about Matt Patricia, you have to respect the fact that he's a film guy. He's been doing it since the beginning of his career. You have a guy like Jeff Okudah that goes out and studies players that much, you're going to get 100% every single time he goes out there. And I love that about him as a player. So as much as I love metrics, there's going to be stuff like that goes beyond it that you just have to look at, you have to acknowledge, you have to accept. And that's, if you have any concerns about Jeff Okudah as a player, understand if there's a limitation that a guy has, there has to be some kind of corresponding advantage. Anquan Boldin wasn't the fastest or the most athletic, but if that ball was in the air, it was his football, period. Mm-hmm. That was an advantage he had that no one else had. It was his football. Jeff Okudah, he comes into that game knowing what you're going to do and how you're going to do it every game that you've played. Can you beat that? Sure. It's really hard, though, to go against a guy who knows everything you're going to do. So I love when they pick up a guy like that. I think that's a perfect addition to this team.
I was going to ask you, and I think we mentioned this before we started talking, but Matt Patricia, what are your thoughts on him real quick?
I love the Matt Patricia signing when they first signed him. I think that a lot of the advantages that the Patriots defense has had over the last few years has been having a defensive coordinator who's willing to adapt and willing to change. And we always go back to, it's just Bill Belichick and everybody that works for him, right? It's Bill Belichick running everything. He's the general manager, the head coach, defensive coordinator, special teams, offense. Everything's Bill Belichick. He's not a one-man show as good as he is. There's pieces that he has to give to other people. And I really loved what Matt Patricia did with that defense because he limited the amount of points that teams could get. He limited the way that they could score on him as a team. And I think that he's been trying to build that here. The issue that I've had is the velocity that he's done that and his complete inability to adjust to not having the personnel that he needs for any given play. And the example that I'm going to give is Jarrad Davis. Fans loathe Jarrad Davis, and I love pointing him out as a player because the league's opinion of Jarrad Davis as a player is much higher than what Lions fans' opinion of Jarrad Davis as a player is. And I've seen people that tell me, like, do you think he's even going to make the team this year? I think there's no doubt that he does because our linebacker core is terrible. Yes, but even if it wasn't, teams love a linebacker that is going to go in there and try to lead his team and do everything he can to push the players around him and will do whatever you tell him to do. And Jarrad Davis will do that. My issue with Matt Patricia is not taking advantage of the players that he has. He has Jelani Tavai that he drafted in the second round last year. And as a rookie, Jelani Tavai was okay. And that's fine as a rookie to be okay. I don't want you to think that's a negative at all. But, that's not dynamic. That's not engaging. That doesn't provide a unique facet to your defense that teams are going to have to design their defense around. That doesn't give you anything. Jared Davis is a ridiculous pass rusher when he puts his mind to it, when he schemed for it. Matt Patricia seemed to take that away from Jared Davis a little bit last year. He continued to do the same thing that Terrell Austin did, where he tried to put Jared Davis into positions that you would expect a middle linebacker to be good at, but that Jared Davis, the player, is not good at. Let's put him in coverage, see if he can cover a receiver on a crossing route. You already know the answer to that is no. Why the hell are you trying to do that? You know the answer is no.
Yep.
Figure out a better way to do that. When Matt Patricia was hired, I expected him to do a little bit more of that, to be a little bit more creative when it comes to his usage of personnel. And he's drafted like he should be. He signed players like he should be. We all give him crap for signing Patriots players, and I get that. But signing a guy like Duron Harmon is a free safety who can cover. He can cover the deep part of the field like nobody else can. And if you were a creative play caller, I would expect you now to use Tracy Walker in that roving role that moves from a free safety to strong safety, to move around from one side of the defense to the other, to cover different people, to blitz, to be a run defender on the edge, do different things. I would expect you to do that and use Will Harris, who you drafted in the third round last year, to use him in a position where you take advantage of his speed and explosiveness. He's got a lot of issues and he's got a lot of things he has to work through, but I would expect you to use him in that third safety role, try to move things around. My issue with Matt Patricia is that I don't know that that's what he's going to do, because I saw him in 2019 using players like Tracy Walker and just saying, all right, well, you're going to be the free safety for this entire game. You're going to be the guy that's going to rove around in the back half of the field. We're going to switch around between, Will Harris and Tavon Wilson and see what we can do on the underside. And it's just uncreative and it's stubborn. And I really want to see more creativity and a move into somebody that tries different things. I was really excited when the Lions fired their defensive coordinator, let him go, whatever. And they decided they were going to hire a new defensive coordinator. I was like, okay, all they got to do is hire somebody who isn't going to be a yes man. They just got to hire somebody who's going to try to challenge Matt Patricia and do some different things and push this team to try other things, other avenues. And they hired a guy who has never called plays. He's never been a defensive coordinator since 97 or something. This was 20 years ago. That he's done anything regarding play calling in Corey Undlin, who was also really bad at developing talent at his position group over the last couple of years. That screams yes man to me, just bellows it in my ears, and I hate that. I really would love to be able to get behind the defensive coordinator signing, but to me, it looks like a guy that he's like, okay, well, I'm going to do the same thing. I just need somebody to kind of continue doing the same thing, and it doesn't give me a lot of reason for being excited. I really wish that I could be, and it's not to knock Corey Undlin. I know whenever you're saying anything negative, it sounds like you're going to bash these guys. Corey Undlin seems like a great guy, seems like a good coach, but his defensive backs group has been pretty bad over the last couple of years and hasn't developed any talent in 4 or 5 years since before he was in Philadelphia. Sometimes that can just be a bad position. You end up in a group where your head coach doesn't really support you. There's always that possibility that it's just a bad spot. But until I see proof that it's a bad spot and he's doing better now and he's in a better situation, I got to go by what I've seen. And I really haven't seen any reason to be excited about that.
Yeah. Ty, you know what? You just, man, you crushed all my hopes and dreams. No,
I try.
Not really. I mean, I don't have high expectations. I have them at 8-8. That's I've been the same way the whole time, pretty much.
Overachieving, in my opinion.
Really? What do you have them at?
I think this is a 6-10 team that could overachieve the 8-8. I think that the same thing that happened in 2019 is going to happen in this year. They're going to get a couple of, like I said, it's a house of cards. You know, there's so much potential, but I feel like there's no way any of that stuff holds up.
And I think that's what happened last year because, you know, you had so many key injuries. Deshaun Hand was a huge injury. People
huge.
underestimate that. You know,
huge injury.
That injury was. And just some of the defensive injuries and Stafford going down, of course. But, I mean, there was injuries there that really caused people to be out of position.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and that hurt that defense a lot because it depends on this guy has this specialty and this is what we're using him for. This guy has this specialty and this is what we're using him for. That is mostly this defense. It's just, you know, oh, this guy's going to take care of this certain thing. Well, if he gets hurt, you don't have anybody to replace him. That is usually that's what's happening on this whole team. Like you said, it's a house of cards. It really is because one relies on the other so much that if you take X player out and you replace him with another, you know, one of our backups, it's not the same thing.
And that's the other problem is the backups on this team are horrendous. You know, people can whine one way or the other with the starters on this team, but one of the things that's very difficult to argue is that the Lions' depth is terrible. It's awful. And there aren't any positions that really stand out as strong in that.
You know, secondary does to me. I think because I like Awarie a little bit more than some people do, so I think that depth is really good.
I had him as CB1.
Did you really?
I loved Awarie, and
we think alike. That sucks.
Yeah. But I'll roll with that thought though. You know, you have Akuda now, and you have Trufant, who. Trufant's going to get a little bit overhyped for what he is. He is definitely on the downslide of his career, very much a Rasheem Mathis type of player, where you're getting the guy right, and that's why I use him because you got a guy that you hope will do well, but you know that his best days are behind him. You know, Oroarie is the ideal player to have in your stable because you know that he can play at a high level. And I love, as I said, he was my CB1 last year. I love Oroarie, but let me tell you, his bad moments as a rookie were so bad. Yeah. Like, as much as I loved him as a player coming out of Penn State, the moment I saw him on the field and I saw what he could do, I was both elated and terrified because I knew that he could do the things I thought he could do. He could. But all those haters, all the people who were like, no, it makes total sense that he fell to the 5th round. I could see exactly what they were talking about because it's all north of the neckline, right? It's all above his head. It's all little things, but those little things.
To me, that's the difference between him and Okuda because measurables, they're really
similar. Oh, yeah. Oh, extremely similar. They've definitely got a type.
Up is totally different.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, and I loved Oroarie coming out, and I still think that he's got the potential to be an all-pro cornerback. But there's so many things. Again, it's just like this team. There's so many things that gotta go right.
I can see him paired with Okuda for years.
Oh yeah, I would love that.
Secondaries in the league, I really can. I mean, that's where I see him. I think Trufant is a stopgap until he develops. It's just the way I see it. And Trufant's injury prone, so I think we'll see him anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. The way this team is, man, injuries wise, if there's a player you wonder about on this team, I would just assume you're going to see him. And any team deals with injuries. You know, every team does. The problem with this Lions team in general over the last 2 general managers, this isn't just Bob Quinn, Martin Mayhew did this too. They tend to ignore injuries. You know, the best projector of future injury is past injury.
I agree.
And you'll always get these scouts that be like, you know what? I'm not a doctor. I'm not an orthopedic surgeon. It's like, you know what? I'm not either, but I am a trend analyst. And I can tell you that if a guy has an ACL tear, he's probably going to get injured again. And it's not like there's some number. Like, we always over-Maddenize things where we think of, like, there's this injury number that we're going to go by, and it has nothing to do with that. It's a matter of players that put themselves at risk will continue to put themselves at risk. Guys that play with a reckless style will continue to do so. That shows up a lot at running back, especially. Guys like
thinking of Javid Best when I hear that.
Yeah, Darius Geis was actually the example I was going to use for a more immediate one. Darius Geis played very reckless for his size. He was a guy that you knew could get hurt at any minute. I'm blanking on his name. Thomas Rawls, played for Central Michigan, played for Michigan, went on to play for the Seahawks. He played like he was 20 pounds heavier than he was. He played like he was so much bigger than he was. And that's awesome if you expect him to stay healthy, which you don't. You know watching him play that he's going to get hurt playing like that. You know, it's like watching a little kid playing with a machete. It's like you are way too little to know what you're going to be doing with that. You know,
You're funny as hell, dude.
it's just that, you know, that type of player. And the Lions have this propensity for just going for those guys. That's part of my concern with DeAndre Swift is that the Lions drafted Kerryon Johnson, who's one of the most injury-prone guys in college football.
Yep.
You know, they drafted him talent-wise. They drafted him right where they should have. Injury-wise, there's no way he was higher than a 4. But they traded up to get him, and what happened? He got hurt, and then he got hurt again, and they got hurt again. They drafted DeAndre Swift this year, who was injured like 4 or 5 times in college. Not as serious as Kerryon Johnson. Don't get me saying that I'm trying to make some parallel there, but the point is that there's a continuing risk that they continue to take. They signed Bo Scarborough, who is the most injury-prone back I've ever seen.
That's why Dallas got rid of him.
Bo Scarborough went in the 7th round. If you went by talent and tape alone, Bo Scarborough was a first-round pick. He went in the 7th round because he has never completed a season of football at the pro level now, college or high school. He finished every single season injured. Oh. And that's not like I'll get better. You can't turn sliders off in real life.
Here's the other thing that I think, because of the general manager position as it is with the Lions, because they think they have got to be smarter than everyone else. So, oh my God, look at the talent that I'm getting here for this price. Oh, this is going to be amazing. Sean Rogers is somebody I think about who had ankle injuries and all this stuff when he was coming out, and they got him, you know, at a really good, you know, place in the draft because of that. And I think it goes to the general manager's mind that, okay, we've done the medicals. He's going to be all right, blah, 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 blah. But, boy, am I going to look good for this pick. Do you know what I mean? That type of thing.
And you know what? People say that a lot with Bob Quinn. I think Martin Mayhew was way more like that than Bob Quinn ever was. But you get a little bit of that because you get a lot of guys that are like, the smartest man in the room shit. But the biggest problem with Bob Quinn is that he has, like, these just raisin-sized balls. He has none. There's none there. There isn't a single pick that Bob Quinn has made since he became general manager, with the exception of Kenny Golladay, that made me think that's a ballsy pick. That's going out on a limb and saying, you know what, I'm going to take that damn dude. I know people will point to Tracy Walker a little bit. I think Tracy Walker, as much as of an unknown as he was amongst the Lions community, I think the draft community kind of had him right about in that area, in the 3rd, maybe 4th round, but they kind of had him in that area. But generally, the Lions have taken guys that are at or below the draft position they take them at. I bring up Jelani Tavai again, and people like to think that I hate on Jelani Tavai because he's not a great athlete, because he ain't. But I love Jelani Tavai. He was one of my sleepers last year. I had him as one of my 2 sleepers for the year. I had 2 guys that were both linebackers and both had JT as their initials, and they were my sleepers for the year that had bad athletic testing, but I thought would still do good, do well. And Jelani Tavai was one of them. But we're talking about a guy that I would have taken in the 5th that I thought could eventually start the way that Tavai was. And the Lions took him in the 2nd round. And they're like, we're going to take him. And he was, again, perfectly fine. But is he a great pass rusher? No. Is he great in coverage? No. Is he a great tackler? No. Is he bad at anything? No. And that's where it really comes in. Bob Quinn is a general manager. As much people want to talk about how much he thinks he's smarter than everybody, Bob Quinn is the most conservative general manager that we've had. Not in that he's, cost versus blah, blah, blah. No, he just looks at how little risk can I take with this pick. It's not about how good of a boom that you can get. It's how little risk you're taking on with each individual player. And if you work backwards for his drafts, it makes so much sense because every player he's taken in the first 4 rounds of his drafts is always about how risky is this player? Not very, taking him. He avoids risk like you wouldn't believe, and it's bled into everything he's done.
But then he doesn't because he takes stupid picks too. I'm dead serious. You know, you why do I not remember the guy's name? The corner we took in the second round. That the name escapes me.
It's Tabor. He's horrible.
Tease Tabor. Who the hell saw him as being anything but Quinn? Nobody. There's nobody I've talked to that thought he was going to be any good in this league at all. But yeah,
let me tell you about Tease Tabor. So I know a lot of people that love Tease Tabor, and I know that because I loathed Tease Tabor as a player. I had people, and I'm not. This is one of those things where you have to evaluate yourself as an evaluator, right? Mm-hmm. I had a 5th round grade on Tease Tabor, and that was clearly too high when you really look back on it. And that bothers me every year when I look back on it, because I was like, did I put him in the 5th round because other people loved him so much? Because I know a lot of people that loved him. Pro Football Focus had him as one of their top corners that year. They had him as one of their top players that year. I have people that I know personally whose evaluations I trust who loved Tease Tabor. There were many an argument in Pride of Detroit Slack rooms about Tease Tabor that got so heated you would just not believe that we are friends.
I've had those.
Name calling and everything. You know, you're calling out everybody for everything. It's like, I don't know what your mom did wrong, but she screwed something up. Those kind of arguments. Yep. But you come out of that on the end, much more positive. But we had arguments like that about Tease Tabor, and for me, I'm looking back on it, I have no idea how I gave him as high of a grade as I did.
Yeah,
he finished his NFL career because he's probably done. He finished his NFL career with 0 pass deflections. Yep. You accidentally get pass deflections as a 2nd round corner. Somebody's going to put you in. Some jackass quarterback is going to throw to you, and you're going to get your hand up. You've lost the ball.
You in the helmet.
Yeah, you've lost the ball. The ball's gone, but you're getting your hand up, trying one of those numbers. You're going to accidentally get your hand up that ball. He didn't do that one time as a pro. That's insane to me. But you're right. Bob Quinn talked, and I think that's what really ingrained the hatred that a lot of people have for Bob Quinn and him, is that as he talked up Tease Tabor, like that was the best prospect. He went through he jumped through every hoop. He said it was the player he evaluated the most tape on ever. Oh. Not fast at all.
Took his time jumping through those hoops, but he did.
And there were so many things that went crazy with that draft. Tease Tabor got hurt during his draft process. He legitimately got injured. He hurt his hamstring. Mm-hmm. But he hurt his hamstring during his private workout with the Lions. It was after his pro day. It was after his pro day. It was after the combine. So he ran the combine. He ran a 4.62. He ran the pro day. I think he ran a 4.72. Ran much worse at his pro day. But he got injured during his individual workout with the Lions. And I think it was Rappaport. I think it was Ian Rappaport that said he got hurt at his pro day, which was wrong and timeline-wise didn't work out. But it was him just saying he got hurt at his pro day. He meant to say private workout, but whatever. He said pro day. So people got it in their head that he was hurt, and that's why his numbers were wrong.
The numbers went down. Okay,
and
I see where you're going with that.
Following the draft as close as I do, I see a lot of that stuff. And the hamstring injury is the dog ate my homework of injuries.
It really is.
Because if a guy runs a bad time, he says, "Oh, I got a sore hamstring. It's just hurting me." And Tabor didn't do that. This is what blows my mind, is Tabor didn't do that. When he ran poorly at the combine, he told everybody, turn on the tape. And honestly, that's what I want a cornerback to do if he runs a bad 40 time. I want him to be like, look at my tape and tell me where I'm slow. Because he might not be. It might not be. The bad time could have been because of injury. It could have been just he doesn't test well. There's guys like that. Those guys exist, right? As much as I look at numbers, those guys exist. And Tabor did everything right. So as much as I talk smack about Tabor because I didn't like him as a prospect and he did terribly, and it was for my team and everything, but like as much as I didn't like him as a prospect, he did everything right. Yeah. You know, he said, look, turn on my tape, watch me play, see what I can do. He did the same thing after his pro day, and then when that out happened, where I might be misquoting, I think it was Rappaport said that he injured himself his pro day. Suddenly the argument became, oh, I was hurt. I had that hamstring, so I can't do a good 40. And I hate that. I hate when guys do that. Darius Leonard's one of the best linebackers in the NFL. Darius Leonard tore his hamstring. I think he tore it. He might have just pulled it, but he hurt his hamstring during the combine. He had a poor RAS because of that. Never once has pointed to that and been like, oh, my testing was shit because I got hurt at the combine. Never once has he looked back and been like, he doesn't care. He knows that his tape speaks for himself. He knows that he went out and did everything that he could. The Seahawks drafted Jordan Brooks this year out of Texas Tech. Jordan Brooks ran a 4.51 while hurt. He was injured and ran a 4.51, and that's the only drill that he did. And people are sitting here calling that like the surprise pick of the first round. It's like, let me tell you, if an NFL team is looking at a guy who has at least decent tape and he ran a 4.51 and could have ran much better, they're going to like that. They're going to look up at that, But he didn't use that as a crutch either. He just said, look, I knew I could run well. I ran well. And then I was done. I didn't want to hurt myself anymore. I did what I came here to do. I'm done. Tease Tabor did that. As bad as he was as a Lion, and he was terrible, he did everything right from an individual perspective up to the point where he was drafted. After he was drafted, he didn't put in the work. Right. He didn't do enough to try to get better. He didn't get any better, and the Lions cut bait when they should have. But prior to the draft, people are always going to look back on those horrible picks as just bad all around. But up to a certain point, he did everything right.
Okay, that's fair. And it's being fair to the player, so that's good. I want to ask you this because we've been on here for probably God knows how long now, and you probably have to eat or something has to happen for you in your life.
I got more booze to drink. I'm out of gin. I got to get more of that.
Oh, you know what? We could have cut it right now. No, I'm just kidding. I want to know where you think that you as Math Bomb, as that entity, what do you think? Where do you think that's going to translate for you over the next 5 years? Where do you see yourself being? What is your goal? What is your goals right now?
Yeah, watching Raz blow up the way that it has over the past few years, it's been incredible. You don't see yourself getting quoted from NFL team sites and thinking to yourself, oh yeah, I knew that was going to happen a couple years ago when I decided to do this as a hobby. You don't really see that kind of stuff happen, and you start seeing it. You got to figure out ways to make that better. My goal has always been to provide this information and make sure that it's free. To make sure that if I'm going to make money off of it, I'm going to make money off of it because I can do things, not because of the score itself, the information itself, because information should be free. It really should be. Legally, it is. Legally, any fact is considered free information that's free from copyright. But I'm a developer. I'm a programmer. I do a lot of really cool stuff behind the scenes that people don't get to see. The development of Raz is more than just, I had an idea and I made it happen. There's coding that had to go in there.
That's right.
When I started in 2013, I knew 2 coding languages. I know 7 now.
Wow.
Fluent enough that I could say that I can code fluently in them. I know 3 more that I'm good enough that I can figure it out. You tell me how to do. You tell me you want something to do. I can figure out how to make it work. I know the code enough. For me, 5 years from now, I just hope that Raz continues to be a thing. I hope that people continue to look at it for what it is, a tool. To help you evaluate players, to try to look at a player and say, you know what, I look at this guy and he looks fast. He measured really poorly. Why did he measure poorly? Was he injured, or am I just not seeing it right on tape? My hope is that when people look at Raz, they're looking at it more as just, I made a number. It proves things. It proves I'm smarter than everybody. It's not about that. If I post somebody that has a good Raz, and they do well on tape, my hope is that people will look at that and say, he's explosive on tape. He's got really good explosion numbers on RAS. That stuff meshes. It looks correct. And when it doesn't, it encourages people to find the reasons why. Why does this guy who looks so explosive on tape not test that way? those are the same skills. You know, when you go out and you do a vertical or a broad jump, you're pushing yourself off from a static point to a different point over a short period of time. I see that on tape. Why doesn't it translate? Why does it look different? I'm hopeful that Raz continues to encourage people to scout in a logical way, in a meaningful way, and people look at the numbers as more than just the numbers. I know I tend to get a bad rap for that when it comes to Raz. Like, I expect everybody with a high Raz to do well and everybody with poor Raz to do poorly. That's just how the numbers tend to work out. And right. I ain't doing that. That's their numbers, you know. My goal is that in the next few years that it's a bit more standardized and people continue to look at those things a bit more objectively, knowing what those facts are and knowing how to look at those things and say, hey, if this guy runs really fast, he should look fast on tape. And if he doesn't, why? And try to figure out why. My hope is that people try to scout better based on that.
That makes perfect sense. It really does. Man, I really appreciate you being on. You can. I'm going to give you the floor to plug whatever you want, how people can get a hold of you and all that if you want right now. So the floor is yours, man.
Yeah, you can find me. The best place to find me is on Twitter at MathBomb. I'm very easy to find. My avatar looks pretty much like this, just a Bob-omb, only with the mustache and the hat. It's pretty easy to find me. I'm very accessible. I will try to answer any questions you have, whether it be about football or math or coding. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier. I've actually been quoted in now 14 different theses for college since 2017. So since 2017, 14 different theses have quoted my work, which is honestly, as much as I've done for football, helping people through their education has helped me. It's meant more to me than anything else. But if you have any questions about that type of stuff or coding in general or how to get into that stuff, I will do my very best to answer you. I am extremely busy, so don't feel offended if I don't go back to you right away. I will try to get back to you as soon as I can. But I write for Pro Football Network. We're a very, very quickly growing site. I do a lot of coding work for them on the back end, so you're going to see some non-RAS centric stuff on there, although they do have some RAS stuff. You can find me on relativeathleticscores.com. That's where all of my metrics are posted. I will be trying to upgrade that every chance that I get to try to make that data more available to you, more useful to you for research purposes. And I still write for Pride of Detroit, so I still cover Detroit Lions-centric stuff over at Pride of Detroit. I'm hopeful that you can follow any of my upcoming articles there as well. And just around, I'm just around. I don't get out a lot, like physically. You're not going to see me out of town a whole lot. But whenever you see me virtually, feel free to reach out, and I will do my very best to get back with you as soon as I can.
I really appreciate you being on. I know you're a very busy person. I appreciate you taking the time for my show. It means a lot to me if you didn't know that. I'm very cavalier about most things. I'm just like, yeah, whatever. But, I really do appreciate it. I thank you for doing this for me.
No problem. Anytime I get to enjoy myself on a podcast, I have fun. And I haven't had – it's been years since I've had a podcast where I was like, sorry I did that one.
God, I hope you don't think that about that.
No. Anytime you guys take the time out to reach out to me now, most of these guys, all of these guys really, you included, everybody takes time. We all have the same audience. We share the same audience. We're all looking out for football fans or fans of the same teams, and we're trying to provide as much information as we can in the best way that we can. And you did a fantastic job, so I wouldn't we'd be too worried about that at all. If you're not already, people who are watching this or listening to this are watching or listening to it, so they're already at least paying attention. If they're not already following, they should.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was very kind words there. Okay, everybody out there, hit the like button and the subscribe button and the bell, and after you do all that, you're probably exhausted, so take 5. All right, everybody, have a wonderful day, and we're out.